So Nixilis, Captive Kingpin, is a fairly popular commander, often brought to cEDH tournaments now and then. But his win rate isn't amazing, it's in the struggling area or somewhere in the middle ground area. And over time it's been dropping. That's how much it has decreased from the start of this year. And if we take a look at my big cEDH tier list, leaderboard basically, this is where Nixilis is placed. And you can see a big difference with Nixilis and the top dog, C-Saber the Lat Captain at 27.35%. But the purpose of this video is to find recommended cards to basically potentially improve your build and maybe give Nixilis a better performance and a better fighting chance in tournaments by showcasing cards that might be recommended that could boost the win rate, and then showcasing the opposite, cards that maybe you basically should avoid. But let's first take a sneak peek at a Nixilis deck list, so link in the description below of this video where you can scroll around at all different Nixilis tournaments, decks that have entered into tournaments. Let's look at the most recent one. So here we have Birgi, we have a new card from Bloomborough. This is basically another version of Firebrand Archer. Disciple of the Vault, Dockside, Firebrand Archer, Goblin Engineer, Hope of Girapur, Prosper, Orcish Bowmaster, Mayhem, Marionette Apprentice. Whenever another creature or artifact you control is put in the grave from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. Yeah, it's basically very similar to Disciple of the Vault. Keswick Flamebreaker, Kedrick Parasite, Imperial Recruiter, Ragavan, Reckless Fireweavers, Simian Spirit Guide, and Walking Ballista. Beshidi Mirror, Demonic Tutor, Diabolic Intent, Gamble, Grape Shot, Imperial Seal, Jeska's Will, Yawgmoth's Will, Wheel of Fortune, Warrior's Oath, Rite of Flame, Reanimate, and Praetor's Grasp. Abrade, Ad Nauseam. You might be skeptic about Ad Nauseam, but I would still recommend it. Sure, we have some really high CMC like All Will Be 1, and we did have Prosper, that's also 4 CMC. Birgi and Imperial Recruiter are also at 3, but I still think you should play Ad Nauseam to just boost your potential win capacities. Cabal Ritual, Cooling the Weak, Dark Ritual, Deadly Frolic, that's also an expensive spell, but still. Deflecting Swat, Pyroblast, Pyrrhic Ritual, Lightning Bolt, Fire Covenant, Final Fortune, Desperate Ritual, Delayed Blast, Fireball, Red Elemental Blast, Slaughter Pact, Tainted Pact, Vamp Tutor, Agatha Soul's Cauldron, Arcane Signet, Chromox, Conqueror's Flade, Defense Grid, Fellowar Stone, Grim Monolith, Mox Amber, Mana Vault, Mana Crypt, Lotus Petal, Lion's Diamond, Yule Lotus, Grinding Station, Mox Diamond, Mox Opal, the Sensei's Divining Top, Soldering, Talisman of Indulgence, Unstable Amulet. Wow, this is a new card I haven't seen yet. And I don't have that much data on it, sadly. We'll get to that later. When Unstable Amulet enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, this will deal 1 damage to each opponent. This is basically what you're going to do. You're going to cast spells from your exile, which will trigger Nixilis to put more cards into your exile, and you can perform a Storm Victory. Now you can tap it, pay 2 energy, exile the top card of your library. You may play it until the end of turn, until you exile another card with Unstable Amulet. Perfect. I mean, you don't need the energy part, you only need the middle ability here. Wishclaw Talisman, Undual Breach, Necropotence, Chthonian Nightmare, and All Will Be 1. But how good are some of those cards? For example, Agatha Soul's Cauldron seems to be fairly okay. It's actually boosting the win rate by a tiny 1%. So it's not bad or not recommended, you could say. Ad Nauseam is decreasing the win rate by 0.31%, which is basically identical to the average win rate, so it's okay. As you see, you can play Ad Nauseam here, I guess. Disciple of the Vault looks like an auto-include. As you see in the middle pie chart here, a lot of people are playing it and it's working out great, obviously. Orcish Bowmaster, auto-include. Firebrand Archer, highly recommended. As you can see, there are been 20% that haven't included Firebrand Archer, and those that have an increase by plus 0.70% win rate. So it looks recommended. Goblin Engineer looks really recommended, and I can explain why quite simple. There's a very key card that is really good, and it's called Defense Grid. Defense Grid is basically a form of Grand Abolisher effect, and as you can see here, Defense Grid is a recommended card in general. During each player's turn, spells played by another player cost an additional 3, which means that if you can get your Defense Grid into play, you get to have your victory protected. and you're tricking Defense Grid into play with the Goblin Engineer, which means that people can't use Force of Negation or Force of Will or anything to stop this. Homeward Path seems really recommended, and I can really see why, because there's a very strong, not strong, but there's a very annoying effect when people are using Gilded Drake to take your Nixilis. You are basically very commander dependent, and you're only on 2 color identities, which means that you can easily slot in a few utility lands that taps for colorless mana, but will do something very important when you really need them. You also play a lot of tutors, as you've already seen inside this build, so the chance of you finding Homeward Path, if you don't have it in your hand, but if someone is taking your Nixilis, you're quite safe. I highly recommend a Homeward Path here. Snuff Out? Not heavily played, but does not look bad. Looks okay. Underworld Breach, basically an auto-include. Mount Doom, basically an auto-include. You tap 3 mana and this and deals 1 damage to each opponent, and that's gonna trigger your Nixilis. So it's like a Thrasius and also hurting your opponents. Scheming Symmetry, or however you pronounce that, minus 6.84% in drop of the win rate, and it's not very popular. And it's not recommended. Don't play this inside your Nixilis. Warrior's Oath, on the other hand, now the sample size is really small. The deck list we did take a look at were playing Warrior's Oath. This is another version, a sorcerer speed to Final Fortune, but as you can see, the win rate is increased by plus 2.75%, so it looks good. The deck we did take a look at were playing Slaughter Pact, and as you can see, quite popular, plus 1.28% increase. And you have a 50-50 split basically, so you have one group that is not playing Slaughter Pact, and you have one group that is playing Slaughter Pact, and the one that is playing Slaughter Pact is doing a little bit better than the other. Conqueror's Flail looks really recommended. This is actually a similar version to Defense Grid. You can also use your Goblin Engineer to find either Defense Grid or Conqueror's Flail, whatever you prefer. The good thing about this one is that you can pass turn and survive the turn cycle, because Defense Grid is a group hug card giving protection to everyone, so don't pass turn with Defense Grid in play. The negative part with this is that it costs more mana, but still okay. Also, by the way, this is gonna help you with your Voltron, which Nixilis doesn't really need that much help with. It already punches pretty good. But still, Cursed Mirror is really recommended, plus 1.53%. This is usually going to come into play as a copy of Dockside Extortionist. Dockside Extortionist is already auto-included inside this build, more or less. So yeah, and by the way, you can clone any creature on the battlefield, so an opponent's Dockside, yeah, perfect. And by the way, you can tutor for this once again with your Goblin Engineer. As you read there, sacrifice an artifact, return target artifact with convert mana cost 3 less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So here you go. Can find and put it into play. Fire Covenant seems to be doing fine. It's not unrecommended. Gutshot. This is basically pay 2 life to exile the top card of your library. Pretty okay. Plus 1.45%. Win rate increase, so it looks recommended. You can also kill Esper Sentinels with this. That's usually kinda recommended to do as well. Magda Brazen Outlaw does not look that recommended for this build. Minus 1.10. I guess that you don't have that many ways of making her become tapped. She's going to do something in the early stages of the game, but this is something of a stormy build. As you've seen, we have things like Firebrand Archers and variants to Firebrand Archers that is going to generate triggers. So instead of sitting here and like making the game go a lot of turns, making Magda tap and tap and tap to make more artifacts and then maybe tutor for a big artifact, isn't really going to happen. You're going to get your Nixilis into play early in the game with a Jeweled Lotus, then slam dunk one of your Firebrand Archers variant, the new Utter, looks absolutely amazing, and then just start casting things like Gutshot for free to trigger your Firebrand Archer, and then draw into more ritual variants like Jeska's Will, that is a ritual and a card draw effect, to trigger your Firebrand Archer again, and continuously dig forward in that way. And Magda and variants to Magda doesn't really seem to be recommended in that kind of game plan. Similar to how Grim Hireling also doesn't really fit either. Rending Volley. So this one popped up. 50-50 split, half of the population is playing it, and it's increasing the win rate by like nothing. So I'm gonna say this is equal to the total average, you could say. Deals 4 damage to target white or blue creature. Why are you playing... What are you killing with this? Sure, you're killing Esper Sentinels and Gilded Drakes. This is very big anti-Gilded Drake tech. Can't be countered by spells or abilities. That's actually a good part. Like, if you really need to kill a white or blue creature, if you have a metagame where something is like really pesky and annoying, like I need to kill this white or blue creature, then this is, yeah, kinda good. I wouldn't be against anyone actually playing this, but it feels very meta dependent. I wouldn't really put this into a tournament build, because you don't know if you're going to go up against anything that this can actually target. Like, there is a chance this is gonna be a dead card and doesn't do anything. Wheel of Fortune looks very popular and increases the win rate a tiny bit. But just because it's so very popular, like the pie chart here in green, 87.5% means that a lot of people want to be playing Wheel of Fortune, so yeah, probably play it. Winds of Change, however, each player shuffles the cards from his or hand into his or library, then draws that many cards, 1 red mana. Not recommended, and very unpopular. Necropotence, basically similar win rate to the total average, and a 50-50 split, or like, it's quite popular, so it looks good, but it doesn't boost your win rate drastically. Cloudstone Courier. Now, with something like Dockside Extortionist and a Orcish Bowmaster, you go infinite damage, but that isn't something you really need. Like, I think this is taking up more space for your build, so in the end it's, as you can see, it's very popular, but it doesn't look that recommended. I wouldn't be against anyone actually playing this, and we will see over time how more of Nixilis decks are brought to tournaments if they are playing Cloudstone Courier, and how that will evaluate their win rate, so to say. But right now it looks like it's a card you could skip. Dual Caster Mage seems really popular, like a heavily played. It does increase the win rate a tiny bit. Like, I think it's okay card, like it can interact, like someone's casting something, like a counterspell, and you can use this to counterspell that thing. Someone casts a Demonic Tutor, and you can cast this to gain a Demonic Tutor instant speed. It's fine. Not a dead card, but I don't think this is a card I would personally play inside Open Nixilis. I would steer more towards the combo and play some other free to cast spells instead that are good for interaction. This is usually a combo card together with Twin Flame, but I don't know. I'm not a personal big fan of Dual Caster Mage, but I can see that people like it. I hope this gives you some form of idea of how you potentially should be playing and building Ob Nixilis, and some cards you should really have and some cards you maybe should steer away from. But I would love to highlight 2 important parts. 1, player skill matters more. We've seen small increases of like this card increases the win rate by like 2%, or this card decreases the win rate by 2% and such. It doesn't have that high of an impact, but player skill matters more. The capacity and skill in executing a certain deck. But still, some card choices seems to be more recommended than others. The second thing I would love to highlight is that I have a really long list of different cards that are worth to take a look at, but these were some of the ones that I wanted to highlight and the ones that have high statistical significance on, as there have been a few new cards that we saw in the beginning of this video that I don't have any data on whatsoever, because they are just that too new. But if there is a specific card you would love to know about, leave a comment below in the video and I will give you the information of how many people are playing it and what's the win rate, because if you're seeing this like in the future, maybe I have that answer then. Until then, take care guys, and I'll see you in the next one.